Hey guys, what's up and welcome to another episode of the Kaylee Unfiltered podcast. Listen, I know it's been a long time coming. I know it has. I've been unwell, I've had holidays, I've had all kinds of things. But honestly, hopefully, we should be on schedule now for definitely every month, but hopefully every 2 weeks. We will see how it goes. Just give me the time I need. If you haven't already seen the first episode of this podcast, I urge you to catch up on that. That is all about my coming out at 34. But today I want to talk about something totally different. Now, this has been in the works for a long time. It's been in the works for months. I appreciate if for any reason you do not watch my main channel, then this won't mean too much to you. But if you don't know, I run a houseplant channel and I used to have a plant shop, which was called the Red Plant Shop. Most of you that are listening to this podcast probably know that, but it's important to cover all bases. I think it would be fair to say that the plant shop was, I think I said this on my video, it wasn't the centerpiece of my channel, although it kind of was. It was more the shop ran in tandem with the channel, and honestly, I could do podcast after podcast after podcast about what actually comes with that territory because, oh my God. But I'm not really here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about, honestly, guys, the real nitty-gritty of why the shop closed down. Because there isn't just one reason. There are tons of reasons. I can't go into every single reason in the world because some of them are just too private and I just can't. But you will honestly get about 90% today. You're going to get a really high percentage of just raw honesty. So if you want to know literally anything about the hows and the whys that the plant shop closed, then feel free to keep on listening. This whole process, by the way, has been horrific is not really the word. It's probably been worse than horrific, if I'm honest. Like, the shop was my entire life, really, and closing it has put me through the ringer. It's put me through a whole range of emotions, and most of them are bad. Most of them are bad. It's important to take away good things from, stuff like this, but honestly, most of them are bad. I've cried. I'm feeling a lot better now. I'm pleased that I've finally announced it to you all. That's been a long time thing coming, and it's been something that's really been like on my chest. So today, it's kind of like the final process of getting this off my chest, explaining everything to you guys and, what's gone wrong. So I've literally made notes on my phone because I could not possibly cover this and remember all of this. I planned this podcast actually to come out before episode 1, by the way, but I just wasn't ready to announce this yet. So it kind of got switched around and then, other stuff happened. So this episode's actually been planned for a long time now. So obviously the super short version is, if you want like 5 words, I don't know if it is 5 words, but if you want the super short version of it, is obviously the business was not profitable anymore. That's why any business would close. So that should be probably not surprising to anybody. But the reasons it became, non-profitable are a lot. I think I've got written down here 5 major reasons, and we're going to go into them. So the first thing that is probably, honestly, I don't think this takes much explaining. This is something that is super apparent, I think, with nearly any shop, and it's a large reason why a lot of plant shops have closed down. I don't know many that are still going, apart from obviously the big original ones. I think at least in the UK, there are some shops going that are, like they're running from home. So fair enough. I'm not saying they don't have the overheads that I had, but they will obviously be reduced. So apart from, lighting, heating, I'm not counting like cost of supplies or anything, but you get my point. It's not going to be quite as bad as a commercial scale, which I'm smiling because it's still traumatic to me how much money all of this was, right? Like, it, honestly, we'll get into it. But the first reason is tissue culture. If you're literally watching this podcast and you have no idea what I'm talking about the process whereby you can clone seemingly very rare plants in a lab at scale very, 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 very quickly. It is, I don't even know how many 100 times faster it would be than manual propagation of plants? I have no idea. I don't really care to find out, but you get my point. It's a lot. And at the end of the day, in the shop, quite simply, guys, plants were dropping in price quicker than I could move them. I would pay, obviously I've paid some sort of markup, could you say, getting plants in from a supplier. I would then wait, let them acclimate. I might sell some immediately if I wanted to sell some larger specimens, but most of the time I would be hoping to produce my own supply. And, that takes a bit of time. And by the time I've done that, and say I buy in 10 plants, by the time I've made 50 out of them, that's a long time. Now, I don't always just buy 10 of something. I've never really talked about this, actually, and how much of like a given plant I would purchase, for example. I've purchased anything from, let's think about this, anything from, say, obviously one plant, to a maximum of, well, a minimum 200, because that was Thai constellation reached 200. Honestly, in the thousands. I think things like Philodendron lupinum and there was a Syngonium I bought in, that was in the thousands. And that was in 2020, so yeah, different climate. But that's not the standard of what I would purchase, okay? The standard thing could be anywhere between 5 and 50, but we'll be conservative and say 5 and 30. So even then, in order to, enlarge that stock and have more numbers, that takes time. And even if I didn't do that, guys, and I would buy something in and I would wait to acclimate it and just sell it on, TCs, honestly, at the rate it's going, it's still quicker than me. Because it's not just the one person tissue culturing, it's the fact that in, Indonesia and Thailand, you've got multiple people tissue culturing these things and they're fighting to get it out quicker. And it's not, because there's so many people producing the tissue culture, you could have like 10 big nurseries producing it instead of like the one that we might have had in like 2020 or whatever. So they're all fighting to give you low prices. And there's now 10 times the volume because everyone's got in and has started to tissue culture. Like, I'm not going to give you a big lesson on supply and demand and things like that, but you get my point. It became something that was just impossible to fight. And I know I'm not the only one that's felt that. I think for a long time, my new strategy was to deal more in variegates, even though I've said this before, I'm not a huge fan of variegated plants over, regular green plants. I do tend to prefer green plants, but that became a little bit better because it was harder to do tissue culture on them. A lot of the time you'd have to brute force them. Now, tissue culture has become so mutated, things are just variegating really, really quickly, and I honestly think there's things that have changed in the protocol, which is kind of like the blueprint for the procedure. A lot of things have changed in protocol. It just means that these things are just popping up. They're all variegated. You can't fight with it. And although I did, I gave it a good run, guys. You can't do it forever, and you just have to accept these things. But tissue culture, if I could summarize it down to tissue culture, that would be reason one that the plant shop, I'm just going to be honest and say ultimately failed, but I realize that saying it failed is completely down to interpretation. A lot of people listening to this would think maybe it was fantastic and it didn't fail at all. This is just part of its natural life cycle. It's kind of up to you on whether you think it was a failure or not. I kind of think it's a bit of both. I think some of it is living its life cycle, and I think some of it is failure on my part, 100%, because I don't think I adapted quick enough. And that's probably because my head has been stuck in different things. It hasn't just been stuck in the shop. I have the channel as well, which is technically separate. I have so many other things going on in my life. Like there has been a lot. It's not just that sort of thing. So anyway, that's one reason, without completely going off on a tangent about tissue culture. That's definitely one reason why the shop just didn't quite go the way I needed it to with tissue culture. And I did think that would happen, but I think it's happened quicker than I thought, which could be some of my naivety. But even then, you will still catch me now saying that I do think tissue culture is good. It will get ugly when everything is so mutated. It just is gross. But for now, I still think it's a good thing. The second reason is my main houseplant channel it's round about 45% of you that are actually from the USA. Okay, and a lot of people have a go at me on my main channel because I say some things and I say it in like American terms. So I did a video, I don't know, like a month ago, and I think I titled it something like end of fall updates, right, on a plant tour. There's a few people going, it's autumn, you're from the UK. And it's like, yeah, I know, but about 5% of you that watch me are from the UK. So it's not that I don't care, I do tailor my content a little bit more towards America, right? Where am I going with this? Well, similarly, my client base for the shop was predominantly American. It was more European as well, things like Germany, France, all of that, Netherlands, but the nurseries in the Netherlands caught up a lot quicker with tissue culture and supply, and they were able to get their own decent supply in, so then my prices were a little bit too high for Europe, and then they dropped out. Totally fine. So I kept on selling to the US, because it was a good market, everything was good. But the prices on shipping and phytosanitary inspection, which, if you don't know, it's not a plant passport, it's like a plant ID, I guess it kind of is a plant passport. I know plant passports are a different thing, but for the sake of civilians' terms, we'll say it's a plant passport. In order to get a plant overseas, there would be a big inspection, and then you'd have to have a phytosanitary certificate. Now, tactically, guys, I undercharged for the delivery and the phyto. Obviously, you can do phyto to the US as well as Netherlands and everywhere. I get that. So my price is automatically for the EU gone, done, cannot compete. I accepted that because I had US trade and I thought, you know what, that's enough to carry me anyway. And it was, honestly, it was. So this is a little bit of a learning thing. When you want to send plants overseas, when you are in this game, shall we say, a few things have to happen. So the first thing is the plants must not have been grown in soil, basically. I think coir is acceptable, but I'm pretty sure that has to all be removed from the roots. I'm not 100% clued upon that, just because I just cut out the soil anyway, and that's why I grew in lacquer. So the plants have to be soil-free. They have to travel as well without any soil on them. And a lot of people used to get very angry that I didn't wrap my plants in moss, but we're not allowed to do that leaving the UK. We are not allowed to do that. We tried and we got in trouble. So that's one thing. You also have to have your plant inspected. Now, we would send out in batches. So if I'm opening a launch to, say, the USA, we would send it out in batches. So say I have 100 plants ready to go. We would book an inspection. Someone would come out and inspect it, produce a certificate for each plant that passed, which they all do. And if they don't, it's rejected. We have to get it to pass. And away you go. Okay. Each certificate costs money, and the inspection itself costs money, including the travel to get to the inspection. And the inspection also costs basically for the amount of time you are there. I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong, the minimum was like £250 in the UK, like minimum before you do anything. And the shop was undercharging for this because I still felt I needed to compete with basically other trade going into the US, okay? And the reason why I thought I could offset this charge, and it did work for a long time, was because I was still getting trade from the UK, right? So the UK postal, I mean, technically I did lose a little bit of money on the postal to the UK as well. But honestly, it was offset by the markup on the plant and stuff like that. So it was a small hit, but I sort of put the money elsewhere. And it just made a lot of sense. So sometimes we would have people cancelling orders and it had already gone through the phytosanitary inspection process. That was really crap. And this is going to go very nicely into my next point, but we would get everything done, right? We did have people that would try and cancel orders after those certificates were made and they would get the money back. So already now, we've lost the money for the certificate. If everybody cancelled their order, which has never happened, then even though I'd paid for an inspection for these plants, they get their money back. So I actually just lost money before I actually do anything, guys, before I do anything. But another thing that happened, and this is another point, UPS, honestly, I could kill them. So what was happening was we've had so many problems with UPS. I cannot put it into words, guys. So one problem we had where if I send out a box to another country, it will have a phytosanitary certificate stuck to the box, and it will have commercial invoices. Now, usually you only need one copy of the commercial invoice, maybe two, okay? We kept having packages get delayed because there was no commercial invoice on the packaging. Sometimes we would have packages delayed because there was no phytosanitary documentation on the packaging. Yeah, bear in mind we get one phyto certificate issued. We can't have two, we have one. If we want to, we have to single-handedly copy them all and store them all. But what used to happen was, I believe they would get out of the UK. But when they left the UK, whoever inspected them or looked at them or scanned them ripped off all of the documents. Not every time. Sometimes they would just take the commercials off, and then at the other side, that would get stopped. Sometimes they would take just the phytosanitary certificate off. On the other side, it would get stopped. Now, you might think, okay, not ideal, but it's fixable. Yes, it is, but there is a delay. But it gets even better. So, through my e-commerce website, I have a third-party app or website that deals with all the orders. You can sort of mass export them and mass shove them into a sort of shipping broker, if you will, and they will do all the labels for you. Right? But if something went wrong, even though our shop, me, is listed for all of the contact information, they would never send stuff to us when there was a problem with something stuck in transit, okay? It wouldn't come to me. It wouldn't come to the shop. It wouldn't come to anybody. Do you know where it would go? It would go to EasyShip, which is the broker that I use to send parcels, right? But EasyShip has no way of telling us. You would think, honestly, guys, you would think that they would. I completely get this, you'd think that they would. But they don't. They don't say anything. So a few of you may have experienced this if you've ordered from my shop. Something will go wrong. And UPS will get in touch with you, the customer, going, hey, this has not got the documents. You might get really annoyed with me, thinking, idiot hasn't put the documents on. And then UPS might say, contact EasyShip. And EasyShip's going to go, nothing. I think they actually end up being met with a brick wall half the time, so UPS don't even get a response. But we don't even know unless we manually check every single tracking number that went out that it's got there. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. We always did spot checks. So if, say, batch went out to, I don't know, Kentucky or something, we knew sort of where they were going, or California, we would do a spot check on a couple of them a couple of days later to make sure they were going through. So that's all well and good, but you're not going to catch all of them. Do you know what I'm saying? We tried to get around this in so many ways. Again, we put more copies on the box. We actually started staggering out sending orders, and we would do them on different days, just in case, basically, guys, just in case some idiot was working that day, and the same idiot took all of the labels off, say, the entire batch of 50. We tried to mitigate that by sending them out in 10s or something like that, which, obviously, not great, leads to delays. Completely get that. But honestly, we really tried everything to mitigate that and just really stop that from happening. But alas, it was happening up until the very end. And it gets better. So another reason we lost money is because when this happens, this is all layering up very nicely when I'm explaining it to you, thank heavens. When this happens, UPS sometimes would destroy the plant, even though it's completely legal, right? And we've paid our side, right? They would sometimes destroy the plant, or they would send it back. If they send it back, we get charged for it being sent back, and it's quite costly. If they destroy it, we lose it anyway. But to be honest, whether we get it back or not, we've still lost the plant most of the time. It's rare that a plant will come back after all these problems and still be alive. Don't get me wrong, it happens. It does happen. But it's not very often, okay? So that's another thing that would happen. So by this point, guys, we have potentially paid for the inspections. We paid for delivery to you guys, which, by the way, so many of you live in places that actually charge a lot extra on UPS. We make you pay a flat fee. We've had to pay like $50 extras just to send it to some of your addresses, but we've done it anyway because there's not a real way to track that. So we've lost all that because obviously it's not gone to you. We've potentially had to pay extra UPS fees. and we've lost the plant. That's a lot of money to lose when you're doing everything right. Do you see what I'm saying? That is an astronomical amount of money to lose when you're doing everything right. And that's just assuming one goes wrong. It's usually an entire batch that have had this happen to. So this is why I said before, we would try and send out in batches of 10, in batches of 5, stagger them out. Is there a better day when idiot isn't working at wherever he's working and doesn't do it? You know what I mean? Sometimes they would go through fine. And then we'd get confident and then send a big batch through because the last couple of times, no one's pulled anything off the boxes. And then it would happen again, but it would happen with a huge amount. I remember some of the last launches, there was a terrible one I did. It might have been January of this year. It was January last year, right? I did a launch like after Christmas, or it was spring or something. And the shop was like opening back up again. And when I tell you guys, I lost all of the money for nearly every single plant that went to the US, and y'all got refunds, and I lost the plant plus money. And remember, I'm not really selling tissue cultured plants that I can get more of. A lot of the times these were propagated, or they were one-offs, or they were super rare. You paid for certain appearance due to like the variegation of the plant or something like that. Like I can't replace these things. And obviously over the years I've had customers very angry for these reasons. And it's like, why can't you replace it? I'm like, I can't, it's a rare plant. It really depends on what it is as to whether I can replace it. And there was such a notable case where this has happened. And I can't remember your name, I'm so sorry, but you'll know who you are if you're watching this. There was a really unfortunate case with a Delta Force, an Anthurium Delta Force, this year. And I think the refund on that was £600 UK. And I think I can't remember, you'll have to correct me if you were that customer, I think I sent 2 Deltas out in that time. And I think I refused sending a third because I just thought this is just not happening. Now, these were properly inspected. They were going out with the phytosanitaries. Everything was fine. But they just didn't make it to the other end. They kept getting pulled and they lost the documentation. And it was horrific. So if you think about that, I've now lost money for 2 inspections. I've lost 2 Delta Force, eye-watering, and I've lost the customer's money. And I've probably not got a very happy customer because they've waited literally months for this, because there'd be times where we were sending other stuff out and I would say like, can you wait a little bit? Because I don't think it's looking too great at the minute. I can't seem to get things through. Can we try next week? Or, there's going to be a cold snap. I really need this to go. And it just wouldn't. Like the frustration on both sides has to be genuinely crazy. Do you know what I'm saying? But there's a really good example of this happening and it's soul destroying and there's nothing you can do. So that's the thing. But there's so many instances of plants just not getting there. And half the time, I don't even know about it. I've done my best to find that out. But the whole system is really difficult. And the only way you could bypass that, I mean, you'd have to not use EasyShip. But then your shop can't really run anymore because you have to manually enter everybody's order details. And I did that when I started the shop, actually. My very first 3 or 4 launches, I did that. And it'd be hours just entering information, and then someone would have the wrong thing sent to them and you'd have to give them the plant for free to compensate for it and stuff like that. So we needed to move to that system of EasyShip, but it was still a problem. But enough about that. I need you to know, guys, just how horrific of a problem UPS was. It has been unbelievably bad. UPS in the UK was fine because there's no paperwork, no problems. I don't think we've really had a problem in the UK, generally. But UPS for outside of the UK, oh my God. Like, honestly, I can't even put it into words more than I have of how bad it was. So this next point is not something anybody knows about. There's one occasion where I've talked about this, and it was actually for an interview with The Guardian. I think it's online. And if you actually Google it, you probably find it. I think he was talking about like the rare plant craze or whatever. And I mentioned this on Instagram a little while ago because, funny enough, it relates to this podcast. When I released the first episode of this podcast, I had a lot more attacks on the shop, right? I'm pretty sure I know who it is. I'm pretty sure I know where it is, like where they are. But I have had, make no mistake, the most horrific attacks on my shop for the last, honestly, at least 3 years. It could be up to 4, but I want to play it safe and say 3. I have had, how can I put this? I've had what you would describe as spam emails. I mean, I've had different attacks involving the shop, don't get me wrong, right? Well, I might touch on that if I remember after I've explained my point. But I've had attacks since around about 2021, whereby I've had spam emails, and you might be thinking again, right, so what? I've had spam emails from anything. You know what? I can't even tell you the subject matter of a lot of these emails because I would get flagged on YouTube and this video would be taken down. I know you're safe on Spotify, okay? Totally get that. But insert trigger warning, and I got emails about it. So we're talking about things like SH, unaliving, the big A, oh my goodness, you name it. I got it. I got some horrendous things. And if somebody had signed me up to something, they would call me like Kaylee Cutter or something like that. And the reason this podcast comes into it was I started to get new harassment, but they clearly still watch my content. I know you're probably watching this now. Can't do anything about it now. Shop's shut. But they would update it. So it would be LGBTQ related, the harassment I was getting. And it would be horrible. It would be absolutely horrible. The effect this had on the shop is quite simple. You couldn't see customer emails, right? I'm not talking a little bit of spam, guys. I'm talking hundreds of emails a day. Now you're probably thinking, have you not heard of a spam filter? And the answer is yes, I have, guys. A few of you have probably got stuck in it. And I know this happens. There's not a lot I can do about it. Believe me when I say I've tried. There are very few people that know about this problem, by the way. I think I told one or two customers. So there'll be 1 or 2 customers in the audience that are watching this that do know about this because I have mentioned it. But I knew if I mentioned it, it would get worse. Do you see what I'm saying? This is why I've never said anything. But it meant that the customer service of the shop was so bad because I couldn't see any emails. I had other people looking at emails. Really hard to see through it. So I put spam filters on, but the spam filters had to be so aggressive. A lot of customer emails, if they didn't come through contact forms and other things like that, some of them, if they had something that the spam filter perceived to be not good, they would just be booted out of the inbox. And we'd never see anything. But we can't turn them off, because if we turn them off, it's completely just inaccessible. Like, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And it got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's never stopped. It's never stopped. And this is the first time I've probably talked about this at all. But I know for a long time, people have said the customer service is just not good enough. And I agree. I have not been able to say why. That is the reason why. But I'm very, very well aware that so many people would email and stuff like that and be like, the response time is insane. I've emailed. I've never had a response, blah, blah, blah. That's the best reasoning I can give you, which is the truth. This is why some people have not gotten through. It's why a lot of you have had slow responses. I am genuinely very, very sorry. I tried everything. I knew at a point it wasn't going to get any better, and I just had to... It was so sad, guys. I had to just accept that that's kind of like what my shop was just going to be known for, which is really, really sad. And if anybody happens to know of any spam solutions that are good and intelligent, let me know, because I would love one for future endeavors kind of thing. So let me know about that. But I need to tell you how bad that was. Not only was it emotionally pretty damaging to read some of the stuff that was coming through there, but if you take all of that out of everything, yeah, I don't care. The logistics alone were impossible. And I've had other people man those emails. You may be watching this. I don't know if you are or not. But I think at the time, a couple of people were getting slightly concerned about the stuff that was coming through. It was genuinely really horrible. And I've got quite thick skin, but some of it was just ridiculous. Sometimes, I guess, they had a sense of humor with what was coming through, with like, you know, we were getting signed up to like fake plant stuff and stuff like that. Fair enough, you know, get your laughs. But the other stuff was so far over the line, it was vile. And if I ever find out who did it, I've got a pretty good idea. But if I ever find out that you're doing it again, I will genuinely do something about it, because now I've got the time, okay? My other business, which is Profolium, which is the feed business, so nurture system, that ain't taking me anywhere near the amount of time the shop is, right? I'm still very busy, but I've got the time to catch you, so I do not advise it, okay? I really don't advise it, because you've slipped up a few times, and you've not put your VPN on, all right? And I've got it all laid out. So I don't advise you do that anymore. But that's not the point of this. The point of this is to genuinely communicate to you, if I can, how bad that was and the significant effect that had on the shop. Now, the effect that had, obviously, low customer satisfaction. People aren't coming back. Why would you come back? And obviously, it snowballed a little bit because more and more people are having the problems as it gets worse and worse and worse, and everything else. Because honestly, half of these spam websites that I was being like signed up to, those websites sign you up for websites. So it became really exponential very, very quickly. But I will leave that point where it is just to be there. But I need you to know, guys, that was real bad. Real bad. And all the way up until the closure of the shop, that was still happening. It was still happening, even through the spam filters. It was wild. Absolutely wild. Now, here's a more obvious problem. Overheads. Overheads were crazy, guys. And I know I've kind of alluded to it in videos before in the past. I've said certain things. I've said, guys, the overheads are eye-watering. Now, I can't tell you what those overheads are. I think that's just a little bit too granular right now. But literally, my rent each month for the shop. So we're not talking heating, lighting, council tax, anything. We're just talking about rent. My rent was a reasonable amount. It's probably the same amount I used to pay on my Manchester flat. Like, it was doable, okay? More than doable. I probably only had to sell like 10 plants and I would have paid the rent, okay? It's fine. But for whatever reason, in 2023, I believe, the landlord, like our tenancy ran out and it was going to roll into a new one. The landlord trebled the rent. So let's just say, for example, the rent was £2,000 a month. It's now £6,000 a month. Now, this happened very late on. When it terminated, it's so unfortunate. The tenancy was due to roll out again in winter. And we didn't think that they were going to spring this on us. And we didn't have time to find anywhere new in winter. We really, really didn't. So we had to just sign it. Even though we genuinely sat there and thought, oh my God, what the hell? How are we going to figure this out? But we had no choice but to sign it. If we tried to down tools and get out of there would have been nowhere to put the plants. They probably all would have died. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? So we signed it. There's a big overhead. Obviously, you have council tax, you have business rates, you have all of the usual things, I would say. Nothing out of the ordinary. If you've had businesses or you've ran businesses or whatever in like a physical premises, that's all by the by, that's fine. The water... So this is fun. All right, it's not just the water, the electricity, the water. We didn't have gas, although they've tried to bill us for gas, which is very interesting. But the electricity and the water were never billed for, well, the entire time that I had the shop, up until this year. Actually, that's not quite right. The water was this year, the electricity was last year. So we got the bill through last year, tens of thousands. Okay, and we did work to pay that off. We couldn't do it up front. They demanded it up front. We were like, you must be joking. You must be joking. So we paid it off in chunks, like X amount a month. Like at one point it was like 1,000. Sometimes we'd send them like a £3,000 or £4,000 chunk, something like that. So that we were working to chip down, as well as now, at this point, the trebled rent. But then the water bill came. And luckily when the water bill came, we knew we were liquidating. I knew that we'd like sort of ran our course sort of thing. So when the water bill came, it didn't feel so bad. But the water bill was the biggest bill of all. And eye-watering, guys. You couldn't add all these problems up. There was no way of chipping anything out of it. And the reason it's happened suddenly and it's been made into a liquidation thing rather than just me sensibly closing the shop is these bills. Now, electricity knew we were there. I don't know what the actual problem even was. I don't know why we didn't get the bill. But there was only so much we could do. We did turn off heating and stuff like that in summer, luckily. So a lot of these bills were based off not even heating the place in summer. It was genuinely just that warm. Lighting, fair enough, but even in summer we reduced it, in winter we still reduced it. That's why a lot of the time in winter the plants really suffered. Like, we did everything we could. We really did everything we could. But we just weren't really billed consistently, and when we did our best to do those bills, but then all of the other things increased at the same time as, all the rules from Brexit and changing the way that everything has to now be FITO'd and UPS losing things. This just sort of, it started stacking on top of each other, and it wasn't till this year where it just became untenable so quickly. I couldn't have foreseen quite what this was, because we also had energy price caps on top of that. So even when the electricity was more affordable, then it went through an energy price cap, and then it wasn't anyway. So there is no other way to say it. The bills got insane. I will at some point receive the final bill, right, of everything. And I've got an idea of what it would be. And I'm not going to say what I think it is because, well, I might be wrong for one. And I'm not sure how important it is. And I'm sure you all will speculate anyway. I have no doubts. But it would be a lot. Okay? And if you guys know the shop and you know some of the things I've sold and the values I've sold them for, if I say something is a lot, it is a lot. All right? I don't play around with stuff like that. I did sell plants that were worth a lot. I know what a lot is, and this is a lot, okay? If you are listening to this, my eyes are very, very wide when I'm saying these words. But it would be a lot, I think. And honestly, throughout this time, it's not just one thing. It is all these things. But obviously, I have had other things that I haven't, and I did mention this before, I haven't had my full attention on the shop, whether it be friendships, relationships, the horse situation took a lot out of me as well, because I was working so hard to pay those bills. That was another thing. That's not the shop bill, by the way. That's a personal bill. That had nothing to do with the shop. But I was just flat out all this time, and maybe I did drop the ball on some things. It was really hard to keep it all in my head. Obviously, I brought Ben on later on. It helped and hindered. I'm not going to go into it. There was a lot. And honestly, there is a lot more to a lot of even what this podcast is today. But I can't tell you. It's part of the 10%. Okay, if you've seen Interstellar, is it TARS that has the honesty setting, and it's set at 90%. That's kind of what this is. So some bits, obviously, I can't really divulge, but in general, it's just been a compounding of so many things that on their own maybe aren't so bad. Although really, when I've gone through this today and I've gone through my points, no, all of them are actually quite bad individually, so that when you add them up, yeah, I get it, It's been really hard when people have openly discussed what they think is going on with me on my YouTube channel, and I've said nothing because legally it was not the right time to say something. Heck, it might still not be the right time to say something now, but we've gone long enough. I'm not carrying this into 2025. I can't do it. I really can't do it. But it's been really hard watching people comment things, debating whether I've gone bankrupt or something like that. And it's that's not quite the same thing. Going bankrupt is a personal thing, where, for example, I would lose my house or something. That's been really tough. It's been tough to do the content in the house, not being able to give an explanation. People ask me for updates on the shop or the living wall, or, hey, when's the restock? And I just haven't been able to say anything. And to carry the weight of that genuinely has been very tough. And I mentioned this on the announcement video that you may be coming directly from on my main channel, but I watched the documentary about this shop and cried and cried and cried. Because I can't believe how much this whole thing has just taken my entire life, and then to not be able to talk about it, to not be able to address things and all of the rest is just mental. It was a mental thing to go through, because honestly, I've genuinely prided myself on being really transparent and really just raw, how it is, unfiltered, if you will. Yeah? That's genuinely been really difficult to not say anything, because if I was in control of it, then I would have said something ages ago. But I guess sometimes, I couldn't have said this a year ago, obviously, because then people would be like, oh, the shop's not doing very well, let's not buy from it, it's going south or whatever. So you can't say those things. You just can't. It's just been really, really tough not being able to fully communicate all of this, but I'm pleased that I'm actually able to do that now. Although this is it's largely doom and gloom. Obviously, it was such a big part of my life, and I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. And thank goodness that I have actually documented the whole thing on my channel. Like, I'll never delete any of that. I'm so happy that at some point I can go and watch that back. But I don't want to sit here and say that it's all bad, because if I just take that away, then I've truly learned nothing. Like, I've truly learned nothing from not just that business, but that way of life, that experience, that journey, all of it. And I have learned a lot. I can't articulate everything I've learned. I think that's a different podcast anyway, as you might imagine. I don't know how long this is. Yeah, we're going to easily tip an hour here probably, but I have learned a lot, and I do hope to carry a lot of lessons into the other business that I have. And I think that's really important, because God, if every person started a business and it just went amazingly well and it never failed and it made all the money, then everyone would probably be millionaires, but we aren't. And I think someone told me the other week, did they say that, was it Jeff Bezos or was it Richard Branson? One of them, I can't remember which one it is, apologies. They went bankrupt like 3 times or something before actually becoming the multi-billionaires that they are today. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen to me. What I'm saying is, you can't succeed at everything the first time. You just can't. And it's important to try as hard as you can. But when it's not about, I guess what I'm saying is, it's not about what happens when it fails. It's what you do from there. What do you learn? What are your next steps? What are you going to do next time that is better? What are you going to watch out for? Because I tell you something, with this shop, I'm going to be watching out for stuff. One of them is 100% my spam filter. It's bills. It's adapting really quickly to change with the market. If something's going a certain way, then react faster. Now, I know I probably couldn't have done that at the time, because for most of it, there was one of me, maximum 2 of me. That's hard to do. That's really hard to do when you've got to be logistics, you've got to be marketing, you've got to be financing, you've got to be all those things. You've got to be market research. You can't, and obviously that's some of the reasons why the shop has ended the way it has. But you can still carry some lessons over. I really think that, and I think it would be a waste of time to not carry those over. My plans from here are obviously not to open a plant shop. My plans from here are to really push with Nurture System, which is my fertilizer brand. I have worked tirelessly on that too. I've worked with a fantastic chemist with a PhD in this sort of stuff. I worked for ages to create the number one, the fertilizer, and obviously I'm bringing out more things in the range. I'm going to keep innovating on that. There are a couple of things that I'm thinking about making, but I need to test them more. So obviously I'm having to privately test them at home to see if they work. I'm just hoping to put my energies into that. Aside from that, I would love to do more work on this podcast. I want to talk about more things. I don't want to make it all business, but I'm very happy to talk about stuff like that, obviously. I certainly want to talk about more LGBTQ stuff on here. All that's not really changing, but I'm just going to try and put 110% into everything. And I'm really hoping that now I've got this off my chest, I have more energy to do so. I think my content on my main channel is obviously going to go through a bit of a shift, but it already has. But I'm hoping that it shifts not for the better, but in a really cool way. I'm just waiting to see where that takes me, I think, for next year, and just sort of feeling it out, you could say. So now it's all about looking to the future and basically reflecting on what I've learned. And honestly, guys, that's what this podcast is genuinely for. So I'm happy to do content about, what I've learned and things like that. And it will feature. If you have episode requests, obviously get them to me. I think on Spotify you can comment on a podcast. I do believe that's there. And of course, on YouTube, you can leave a comment and I will read them. So feel free to submit any requests on what you'd like me to talk about. But I do think that kind of covers a bit of a post-mortem, if you will. It's probably quite a good way of looking at it, to be honest, considering the shop is dead. I can't believe I'm smiling saying that. That's very... Oh, guys, honestly, up in my brain, up in here, weird things are going on, honestly. I think I force myself to feel good about it sometimes. In some ways it is good, don't get me wrong. It's a weight off my shoulders, I guess. But yeah, so if you've got episode requests, do let me know. Thank you very much for tuning in today. No doubt I will end this podcast and there will be things that I wish I'd said. So I guess that is what it is. There's probably some things I've even forgotten to plug. But I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to this. I really do. I hope it's made some sense. I hope it brings, if anyone cares enough, of course, some closure to anyone that was wondering. I will say this now before we go, if anybody has any problems with the shop, I did say this on my main announcement video on my main channel, but if anybody has any problems with the shop, like a missing order or something that's got stuck and we just have not found out about it, then I think you're going to have to contact my liquidator, because legally the company is now, it's basically not in my hands. I'm not in control of it, and I'm not allowed to touch bank accounts. I'm not allowed to do anything, okay? It's not my company. That's the best way I can describe it. So you may have to go through my liquidator, which I believe is simplycorporate.co.uk. And I think my liquidator's name is Andy Platt. So we're about to initiate liquidation in terms of like official paperwork very shortly. So if you have a problem, you are going to have to provide evidence of it. You can't just have an order from me that's gone well and then pretend that you don't have it. But I guess that's where you'd have to go. And the system there will be, you are part of a pecking order, because I'm not totally clued up on liquidation, but basically there is a pecking order of who you owe money to. Once everyone's taken their money, then wherever you are in the pecking order, you get that. And I think government, stuff like that comes first, so banks and stuff like that come first. But that's what you probably need to do. So that's just a tiny little reminder that I'm really, really not in control of that. And I do apologize. I really did try and square up with stuff that was in the bank before I had to hand it over as much as humanly possible with people. I really, really did. So I'm hoping that all of that is tied up, but I'm just saying it just in case. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please leave requests on your next episode. You can leave any comments you like. I will definitely be reading them, and I will definitely aim to respond to them, both on here and Spotify. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. This is coming out just before Christmas, either the 23rd or the 24th. It really depends on when this is prepared. But I hope you have a fantastic Christmas. If you're listening to this afterwards, I hope you have had a great Christmas. And I will see you in January for the next episode, whatever that may be. Thank you so much, guys. I will love you and leave you. Goodbye.